Hey, Joe from Mindshore here. Let's talk about money and funding. Peter Thiel has supported the Seasteading Institute for many years. He's been outspoken about trying political alternatives for many years. And this is one reason that I think that once we have something working on a small scale, financing is not going to be a big issue with Mindshore. It takes a tremendous understanding to see that objectivism can work on a personal level, even more to see how it can work for a society, and even more to see how a country can be built based on a philosophy. It is also abstract and purely conceptual at this stage, and I think that's a good reason why many objectivists are very skeptical. I think that to many people, building an objectivist society just seems infeasible. But let's listen in as billionaire Peter Thiel talks about seasteading.
Let's shift to some new ideas. How do you feel about that?
Absolutely.
Let's do some new ideas. So seasteading is one of the things that you've been interested in for years. This idea that we're going to basically create, in effect, states that are going to be on platforms in the sea that I think are sort of going to be libertarian utopias, or at least that would be the general idea. Seems like it had a lot of momentum behind it for a while, then kind of went away. I think there's some renewed interest in it now. What got you interested in this, and where is it at now?
It was Milton Friedman. I sort of knew Milton Friedman a little bit, and his grandson, Patrick Friedman, I sort of got in touch with, and he was he sort of spearheaded this seasteading idea probably about a decade ago now. And it was sort of a creative, different, interesting idea. You know, I gave it a small amount of funding. It wasn't one of the things I did that much with, but it somehow hit an incredible nerve. And so, and I think it hit such a nerve because, this idea of starting a new country or doing something new, it reminds people that if we had to design a country from scratch, we designed the state of California from scratch, it would be so different. And there's sort of all these sort of super corrupt governance institutions we'd clean out, and we'd, and so it's I'm not sure I'd call it utopian, but it's a thought experiment that energizes people and gets them to think about things. I spoke at this free market university in Guatemala years ago, and they told me that they had free speech on everything, but the one thing that you weren't allowed to speak about were things like seasteading or starting new countries. And the reason you weren't allowed to speak about them was that if you started, people wouldn't want to talk about anything else.
Right.
And it's because it's always such a powerful hook. Now, there are questions about whether it will be allowed, so you have to sort of get probably some local permission. There's a question how technologically feasible it is. There's sort of a pilot program that they're working with French Polynesia and starting. It's still somewhere in the intermediate stage. But yeah, you can perhaps if you can get political autonomy, the assumption is you would do things that are very different. You might do medical tourism. You might do there might be all sorts of offshore banking. You could do there'd be all kinds of things that one might be able to do differently. And the link to technology that I think you let a lot of these different microstates bloom, and you'd sort of see what would come out of it. But the specific scientific technological thing that I think could come out of some new political arrangements at some point is always this question whether we could get new medicines, new drugs. Could you have something where you use psilocybin or MDMA as a antidepressant drug, or can you get new medical treatments through where you sort of break the FDA monopoly on medicine worldwide.
So basically you would see all of these different units sort of having different rules that they live by, kind of as an experiment to see what would work. Is that?
That's one level, but then the specific thing that I would, that's the general abstract level, but the specific thing that I would hope would come out of it would be more scientific and technological progress that's too heavily regulated by the heavy hand of our existing state, and that there are all these things we can't do. So there's all sorts of things of governance that might be better. You might have like a different penal system where you don't have millions of people who are incarcerated. There are all sorts of things one might do very differently. The specific one that I'm probably most attracted to is this question of whether we can do new biomedical things.
Yeah, so all right, we could do 3 hours just on this, but so only one more question on this, which is, how do you decide who gets in on this? How do you decide who can live there, who can be part of this? I mean, is this purely a financial move? If you've got enough money, you're good to go, or are you trying to build a society and picking all sorts of other people and all of those things?
Well, you get to make all these decisions.
You get to make these decisions.
You get to make these decisions, and that's But I think that's always sort of one of the foundational decisions in a society. Who's part of it? How do we define it? And it can be unfair and oppressive if you have just one society, and if you're not in it, you're nowhere. Mm-hmm. But if you have many of these places, that's very different.
Yeah, and so the pushback on this is then that somehow this means you don't like America or something like that, which is.
No, but I certainly think that if we have competition governance, we would do a lot better.
Yeah.
I think that once we get Mindshore working on a small scale, it's going to grow very easily, and financing is not going to be a problem because it is going to be so much better than existing alternatives. Objectivism will grow much faster as a philosophy, and Mindshore or a similar society will grow very fast because of the emphasis on individual rights. People are very interested in this subject, and the problem is only to get it to work on a small scale. Once we get that working, the billionaires will be there with piles of money and a lot of expertise on how to get systems to grow very fast. These people are very good at scaling businesses that work. Thank you for your time.